Today we're going to be going through what we're calling frequently asked questions. Some of them are not that frequent, but they're interesting, so I've added them to the list. And if you've taken this class before, we started at the beginning and didn't get through. So today we're going to start with the last one and work backwards. So there may be some you haven't heard before. And I've added some also since the last time. So I'm starting with number 43. And as I said, we'll work backwards. This is something that's fairly new. The question was, what are the current drone regulations? I actually received this question this last week. What are the current regulations in regard to drones, and specifically as it relates to real estate? There has been approximately a 2-year discussion. I wrote battle on here. That's a little strong, but it's been pretty heated at times between the National Association of Realtors, the Federal Aviation Authority, and the Airline Pilots Association in regard to what should be allowed in regard to drones. It's sort of like trying to hold back the tide. I mean, the FAA, their attitude is, no drones, we don't want them at all. Let the military do that, we don't want them flying around. And the Florida Association of Realtors, National Association of Realtors, has taken the position of, look, this is a legitimate application in the real estate industry. We need to be able to do aerial photography. And of course, we've done it for years using long poles and that sort of thing, but drones are just great because you can actually, fly up to a property, fly over it, see behind it, all of this kind of stuff. So they've come to somewhat of a compromise on it. Here are the rules as I understand them at the present time. Number one, it applies only to drones that are under 55 pounds, so relatively small. The operator must be licensed by the FAA. They have to take an exam from the FAA to demonstrate their knowledge of aeronautics. The drone must be kept in sight by the operator at all times. The National Association of Realtors is objecting to that, and we're hoping to get that overturned at some point. The drones may not be flown over people who are not involved in their operation. They may be flown only between the hours of 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunset. They may be flown no higher than 400 feet, and their speed may not exceed 100 miles an hour. Now, that's a lot of the next one. How long must I have my sales license before getting my broker license? Everybody knows that's 2 years. Good. I had somebody the other day just say, I thought it was just 1 year. And I had to tell them that they were 9 years out of date. It changed in 2007. Is it okay to have my husband's handyman business on the back of my real estate card? The answer is yes. You can do that. And actually, yeah, you can do that. At Florida Homes Realty, we have a number of agents who have multiple businesses. We have somebody who's in the insurance business. Their insurance business is on the flip side of their card. We have somebody else that sells health food. It's on the flip side of their card. So, if you want your husband's handyman business on the back of your card, you can do it. This next one has to do with marital status. I'm about to list a house in which the married couple is in the midst of a divorce. The husband has moved out of town and gone to another state. Do I need both signatures on the listing agreement? Absolutely. They're still married. In fact, if they're separated, contemplating divorce, Florida is a community property state. Neither spouse can list a property without the other agreeing to it. If they wind up divorced, then the court is going to determine who owns the property, at which point you can deal with the owner and get the listing. But as long as they're married and disagreeing on whether to sell the house or not, you're not going to get listed. Okay, surveys. Is a survey required on all real estate transactions? No, not on condos. This isn't part of this question, but as long as we're on it, let's talk about it. What if your buyer says, I don't need a survey, I don't want a survey? What do you do?
Get them to sign off that they don't require it.
Exactly. Number one, you want to give them all the reasons they do need a survey, but if they insist on no survey, then you get them to sign what we call a hold harmless agreement, which basically says, hey, I've told you the reasons you need a survey, you've opted not to get a survey. Please sign this indicating that you recognize that I did make this all clear to you. So that is important because otherwise it can come back and bite you. I have a listing on which we received a good offer that is contingent on the sale of the buyer's present property. How should I advise my buyer? My seller, I'm sorry, how should I advise my seller to respond to this offer? On sale and contingent on closing. Contingent on sale is probably not a good idea because basically you'd be taking the seller's property off the market. It's open-ended. You don't know when it'll ever happen. If it's contingent on closing, then it might be worth looking at because it could be that closing is going to take place in 30 days. The deal looks good. The rest of the contract looks
I
good.
would have questions.
Yeah, you want to know where that deal stands. How likely is it to close? And if it looks good and the rest of the contract looks good, then there's probably no reason not to go ahead and accept that deal because I would do it as contingent. I'd put it in MLS as contingent, active contingent, so that you continue to market, you take backup offers, and that way you haven't taken it off the market entirely. Right.
Can you also do a first right of refusal?
That's exactly what.
Yes. Yes. And then in which case it'd go on MLS as CTG FROR. So contingent first right of refusal. I have a buyer and another Florida Homes agent has the seller. Is there a need for any kind of disclosure for this situation?
We're transaction brokers.
Right. The state of Florida presumes that all of us operate as transaction brokers unless we specifically do it otherwise. Now, let's suppose that prior to writing a contract involving two of our agents, one of them is already working as a single agent for either the buyer or the seller. In that case, then they would need to have the transition to transaction broker document signed. All right, this really happened recently. My buyer expected new appliances because that's what it says in MLS. But the appliances at walkthrough were not new, and the seller won't provide new. The contract does not mention new appliances. What can my buyer do? And sadly, I had to tell him not much. Number one, you cannot count on MLS. MLS can be changed. A lot of times I'll see contracts where people say, appliances as mentioned in MLS. Well, that doesn't get it. If the appliances are important, you want to list those appliances in the contract by name, model number, photos, perhaps, whatever it takes. And particularly if they're new, they're valuable. I've seen it before where there's a perfectly good Sub-Zero refrigerator sitting there, and they buy on the basis of that, and all it says in the contract is refrigerator. So they come to walk through, Sub-Zero's gone, and there's a used refrigerator at its place. Nothing you can do. You got to make it explicit in the contract. By the way, since you mentioned seller's disclosure, if you've been in my other classes, you've heard this before, but is there any law saying that the seller must fill out a seller's disclosure?
Nope.
There is no legal requirement for it. However, if you've got the seller, I recommend that you encourage them to do it because, number one, buyers expect it. Number two, If you don't do it, it appears you're trying to withhold something. If you do it, it shows that you're forthcoming, you're being open and honest, and making it, all the information available to them. Now, while they are not legally required to fill out that form, they are legally required to disclose any information that materially affects the value of the property that is not readily observable. Basic rule, when in doubt, disclose. If you have to ask the question, should I disclose this? The answer is yes. I have a buyer, and the seller's agent is demanding a copy of the appraisal, even though I've already informed him there is no problem with the appraisal. It appraised sufficiently. Do I have to give it to him?
No,
No way. Who owns it?
the buyer.
Buyer paid for it. Buyer owns it. If he is magnanimous and wants to give it to the seller, he's welcome to do that. But, yeah. My buyer's lender had the Florida Homes transaction fee deleted from the closing documents on my transaction. This actually happened. When questioned, the loan originator stated that the FHA doesn't allow such a fee. Is this true?
No.
It's not true. Now, I'm not going to say the guy lied about it. He probably didn't know any better, or maybe he was told that. Who knows? But the fact is, the FHA has no such rule. Okay, how long must a property be off the NEFAR MLS before it can be relisted with a cumulative days on market of 0? It's 60 days. If any of you are operating in St. Augustine, it's only 30 days. This is the purpose of the Florida Homes Realty disclosures. When are they required, and where do I find them?
Back agent.
They are legal documents for your protection and for the protection of the company, which clarify for your customer a number of different issues. Similar disclosures are in use by most brokerages. I know when they first went in, which was July 23rd of this year, a number of agents said, well, why do we have to do this? Nobody else does. Wrong. Most brokerages do. And it basically is a CYA for the brokerage. And they are found on Back Agent. If you click on Office, click on Documents, and look down, you'll find it under Florida Homes Realty and Mortgage. Okay, I have just received 3 offers on my listing. Must I let each buyer know that it is a multiple offer situation and call for highest and best?
Yes.
No,
No,
really. Not only are you not required to do so, but you may not do so without the seller's written directions. In any situation where offers come in, single offer, multiple offers, doesn't matter, the seller is the one in charge. He's the one who makes the decisions. Let's say the 3 offer situation. That seller has a right to accept one of those offers and reject the other 2. He has a right to reject all 3. He has a right to make a counteroffer to any one of them. And he has the right to say, hey, let's try for highest and best and see what we get. Your job as the agent for the seller then is to explain to the seller the advantages of the highest and best and the disadvantages. The advantage to the highest and best is, hey, you may get a better offer than any of the 3 you've got now. The disadvantage is any one or all of the offers could drop out. They might not want to play the game. So, I think if I were the seller, I'd take my chances. One of the 3 of them will hang in there. But it's up to him. Keep that in mind. You don't want to jump ahead and, send out a notice of multiple offers until you've got in writing from your seller what he wants to do. If you're listing a property and you're filling out the MLS input sheet and it says on there dual variable, yes, no, what do? Do you know what dual variable means? Okay. What that does is disclose to the world that you are offering a commission that varies depending. In other words, let's say you're the listing agent and you have listed the property at 6%, but you've told the seller, hey, if I bring the buyer, we'll do it at 5.5. You have got to disclose that. Not the amount in MLS, but you've got to disclose that it exists, that this situation exists. And if an agent calls you up and says, okay, I see you've marked dual variable yes, tell me about it. You have to give them the facts.
Okay.
On the Fannie Mae contract, is there any way around the requirement that the property being purchased must be owner occupied? Is there any way around the requirement that the purchase of Fannie Mae, that it must be owner occupied? I mean, I've had people say, you know, this guy's really an investor, but you know, he just wants to buy this and, you know, rent it out and all that. And the answer is no. There is no way around it, because you got to sign an affidavit stating that you're going to live there. This is going to be your primary residence.
Are you saying FHA or Fannie Mae?
Fannie Mae.
Fannie Mae has investment loans. FHA is owner occupied only.
Okay, well, anytime you see one of these things where they are saying, you know, that it's got to be owner occupied, there is no way around it. In other words, acronyms. Every industry has its own acronyms. Let me try you out on a few of them. ALA. Right. Good. Very good. Except the post office. Post office thinks it's just AL. Yeah, I was going to say post office only recognizes AL. But ALA. You should know this being lender.
I thought you were going with Alta, but
No. Arm's length affidavit.
Like affidavit, I would have never
I
gotten
admit my
that one.
ignorance on that one.
Oh, it's for short sales.
AUC. Auction is correct. BOM,
Backup market.
exactly. CD, closing disclosure, yeah. CDOM, cumulative days on market is correct. CTG,
Contingent.
contingent.
I got that one.
EMD, escrow money deposit. HHA, that's another hard one.
I don't know. We had 3 hours of sleep. My brain's not
Something housing
functioning.
what?
It's hold harmless agreement.
Hold harmless
Agreement,
Hold
Harmless agreement.
yeah, hold harmless agreement. That's
Where
what
do you
we're,
use that?
that's what we were talking about earlier, where,
Or
We-
they refuse a home inspection.
Janet, I'll answer.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. Good job. You did pretty well. I do too.
It would be any kind of an agreement where you are getting basically an affidavit saying that you have
They do not want this.
disclosed something. For example, we talked earlier about the survey. You know, if you've got a buyer who doesn't want to get a survey, and you've told them they need it, and they still refuse, they're not getting the loan, it's a cash deal. And you have them sign a document saying that they recognize that you've told them the advantages in having a survey, and they've elected not to do so. That's a hold harmless agreement.
Okay. Do you have that in your packaging?
Who will issue title if without a survey? Will anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. No problem.
I thought that was the whole reason for the survey was the title.
No. No, the reason for the survey is really for the buyer to find out if, you know, what the exceptions are, you know, what are the easements, what are, you know, restrictions and so forth. LE,
Question.
yes,
Is it in the packaging forms for the office? 'Cause
the hold harmless agreement, probably not.
So- on MLS, one is the one.
Is there one on there?
Okay.
Okay, I'm not,
If not, maybe under form simplicity for FARPA
yeah,
information.
I'm not sure there is one, just a blank
Yeah,
hold
because
harmless agreement. I think you just need to write it,
Yeah.
you know, and basically it doesn't have to be anything very formal or fancy. An email will do.
Okay. We have a lot
Doesn't
of
have
that
to be
with auction homes, so
Mm-hmm.
we don't really care.
Septic tanks is a big one that people don't get inspections on.
Right.
Which one?
Septic tank.
Yeah. LE, loan estimate is correct. And ROFR, right of first refusal, we talked about that earlier. WD,
We're just going out.
withdrawn.
Oh, WD.
WD, oh, okay.
Okay, those are just examples, but it's interesting how many acronyms there are. There's a whole lot of them. I'm about to write my first listing for a short sale. Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, number one, stay away from it if you can. But actually, if it's your first one, you've already answered one question, which is, do you have experience in negotiating a short sale? Obviously not. My recommendation is get legal help. And specifically, I recommend David Heekin at Heekin Law. David Heekin. He's the owner of Landmark Title and Heekin Law. And he is an expert on short sales. He's negotiated a lot of them. And I would just take my seller by the hand and say, let me introduce you to David Heekin. This actually happened to one of our agents. I got cheated out of my commission by the buyer with whom I was working because he turned out to be a licensed agent and failed to let me know until closing. Is there any way to recover that commission?
Oh,
Department
yes.
of Business and Professional Regulation.
That's right.
In this particular case, no. In this particular case, no, because the buyer was a licensed agent, but not a realtor. So he is not bound by the Code of Ethics. The bottom line of this is two things, two questions you want to ask your buyer. Number one, are you licensed? Number two, are you working with another realtor? And get those clear up front before you ever start spending your time with them. If my seller lied on his property disclosure statement, do I or does Florida Homes Realty have any liability?
Did you know?
The answer is no, if you did not help them fill out that.
Okay, so
Talking about acronyms again, what is FERPTA, F-I-R-P-T-A, and do I need to be concerned about it?
Foreign investor.
Foreign Investor Real Property Tax Act. Foreign Investor Real Property Tax Act. It is a federal law that if a foreigner, and this is someone who is not a U.S. citizen and does not have a resident alien status, they're considered foreigners. And if they own a piece of property and they sell it, Uncle Sam wants to get his cut of tax if there is a capital gain on it. And they do that by having on the contract now, you'll notice on the newer contracts that it says, check here if seller is a foreign person. You want to be sure that the closing coordinator has that information, that they know, because they're going to, at closing, want to withhold a certain amount of tax. And it's a complex thing. You can't actually calculate it. It depends on the value of the property. There are exceptions and so forth. But it gets to be pretty serious on $1 million home. The guy's had it for a number of years, and he bought it for $500,000. Now it's worth $1.5 million. And so there's $1 million profit on there, and he's going to owe some capital gains tax on it. and he's going back to Russia. How is Uncle Sam going to get their backsheesh? They're going to get it because they're going to force it at closing that the seller is part of his funds that he's going to get. He's going to pay some of it to the IRS at closing. If he doesn't, listen to this carefully, if that doesn't happen for some reason or other, guess who could be responsible for that tax?
Yeah.
The buyer.
The buyer, oh.
Your buyer. So you want to be really careful when you've got the buyer in that situation to make sure that if that seller was a foreign person, that that tax got paid if there was any tax.
And if,
My buyer would like to use a particular title company. May he do so?
That's the sellers.
You can always ask, right?
But then he has
Well,
to pay the,
exactly. That's the key. Normally, the seller selects the title company and pays for the buyer's title insurance. If the buyer, this happens sometimes with investors, they're buying properties regularly, usually lower end stuff, and they've got a particular title company that they have worked with and they enjoy working with and they want to keep that relationship. They may just say, hey, I want to use this title company. I don't mind paying for the title insurance. My customer insists that there is now or soon will be a new tax on all real estate sales to help fund Obamacare. Is this true?
It's not after 500,000?
Not true. No, at any price. It's one of those urban legends that goes around the internet periodically.
only to certain people.
No, no such thing.
Who asked for it?
We talked about this one already a little bit. Somebody called me up and said, can a customer fire an agent? And the answer is yes. Customer can end the relationship with an agent if he wishes to. If the customer is a seller, the listing agreement is with the brokerage, and that seller can ask for a different agent, for one reason or another. Or he can cancel the listing entirely. There may be a penalty depending on how the listing was written. But yeah, if it's a buyer, unless there's a buyer brokerage agreement, he can leave at any time. If there is a buyer brokerage agreement, there is a clause in there that deals with ending it. What documents must my condo seller provide to the buyer and when?
The condo docs have closed, right?
Well, no. Jerry?
Well, I keep forgetting, it's 3 days if it's new and 15 if it's not a new, or it's the opposite.
If it's new, it's 15 days.
But
We're talking about right of rescission period on a condo. It's 15 days on a new condo, and it's 3 days on a used condo. But the documents we're talking about that have to be given are, number one, you need the
condo rider.
condo rider, number one. You need the condo governance form. And by the way, that condo rider is found under the comprehensive rider on Form Simplicity. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I'm thinking FAR bar. You don't need to worry about it. At any rate, the condo rider, the condo governance form, and the frequently asked questions form. Those are the three documents you've got to give them. And you've got to give them as soon as possible if you're representing the seller, because that 3-day count that you're referring to doesn't start until they get those documents. A little strange, but it actually happened. My buyer is buying a second condo in the same condo complex. Since he already owns a condo there and has received the documents previously, and the management company wants to charge for documents, does he still have to be provided a second time with all the normal condo docs?
Yes.
Actually, no, he doesn't have to. What he does need to do is sign the receipt of condo docs
Oh, okay.
and say, okay, I've got all this, and give it back to the seller. There's no need to duplicate. Obviously, we're in Jacksonville. All of you use NEFAR documents primarily. Does anybody sell down in St. Johns County or any place else that uses FARBAR?
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, okay. What happens if you receive a contract? You got the listing, you receive a contract on a FARBAR contract, what do you do? Besides panic,
Get help.
you deal with it.
Can you counter
It is-
if it's such a big deal?
It is a perfectly legal document. In fact, it's much more popular than the NEFAR. NEFAR is restricted primarily to Duval, Clay County, Nassau, northern half of St. John's. But anything outside of that, everybody's using FARBAR. I would suggest at least have a bit of a working relationship with it. So if you receive a contract on it, know what you're looking for on there. Call me if you need help. But the fact is you cannot, and I've had this happen where somebody has submitted a FARBAR contract to a NEFAR agent and they say, oh, we won't take this. You can't do that. It's a valid contract, it's a legal contract, and you have to consider it.
Well, those people that are so whatever by that, I mean, they could just counter with an EFAR contract, right?
Well, they could, but that isn't going to make the people who are familiar with FARBAR real happy. What I tell the agents in St. Augustine is, you know, if you're going to sell something in the area that uses an EFAR contract, just as a matter of courtesy, use the NEFAR contract, submit your offer on NEFAR. But the fact is they don't have to.
The only big difference I've always noticed is the survey. And we're kind of one of the few areas that the survey's the responsibility.
The
So,
biggest difference is in inspection.
inspection. The 10 days.
FARBAR has two different contracts. They've got a FARBAR contract, they've got a FARBAR as-is contract. On the NEFAR contract, the inspection period is 10 days, and during that time, the wording says, if in the sole discretion of the buyer, he finds anything that he doesn't like, he can walk and get his money back during those 10 days. On the FARBAR as-is, it says the same thing, essentially the same wording, but it's a 15-day period. But on the FARBAR regular contract, there is no such walk away. On the FARBAR regular contract, it says seller will pay X amount for repairs, X amount for WDO, X amount for closing out of any open permits, that sort of thing. And he agrees to that. You know, if they've signed the contract, they've agreed to it. The default on it's 1.5%. Usually it's less than that. People will write in $1,000, $1,500, something like that. And at that point, the seller is committed to do $1,500 worth of repairs. Now, when the inspection is done, let's suppose it comes back at $2,000. The seller says, hey, I'll just spot you the $1,500 at closing, you take care of the repairs. Or the buyer could say, I want this, 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 and this done, but let's forget these other things up to the $1,500. So it becomes a negotiation just like the others do. But there's no walk away. And that's something to keep in mind. For that reason, I recommend to anyone who's working with a buyer, use the NEFAR contract or the FARBAR as is. If you're working with a seller, I would recommend putting in MLS, please submit all offers on FARBAR regular contract, because it's fair to the seller. In my personal opinion, and this is just a personal opinion, it is unfair to sellers to have a situation where they are basically removing their property from the market for a period of 10 days or 15 days, where the buyer can just walk away because the wife decided she didn't like the color of the drapes. I have an unlicensed friend who wants to sell his house himself to his unlicensed relative. May they use the NEFAR PASA contract? Why not?
Was there anything that stops them from using it?
It is copyrighted for the use only of NEFAR members.
So what is a closing attorney supposed to go, no, this is, y'all don't have the right to use this?
Number one, they shouldn't be able to get hold of one. So the answer is no, your friend cannot use the NEFAR contract, they can't use the FARBAR contract, they're both copyrighted. Go down to the stationery store and buy a generic contract. But better than that, once they bought that generic contract, then you go to them and you got a NEFAR contract here. Generic contract's 3 pages, NEFAR contract's 10 pages. Now, which one do you think's a better contract? Which one's going to give you more protection? Why don't you let me handle this professionally for you? You're my friend, I'll give you a reduced rate, whatever. But, the contracts are copyrighted, so no, they cannot be used by anyone but licensed agents.